Hi, my name is Angela, and this is part 3 of a 4-part video series covering what I would tell a pharmacy student who is going into pharmacy residency interviews. This video specifically is about interviewing the program or interviewing them, what you would be wanting to ask and the questions and kind of how to prepare for that side of the interview process. So again, this channel is just for me to provide residency and pharmacy related information, just to give my own experience to hopefully help those of you watching who just want to hear from someone going through the process and hear some advice from someone who has made it into residency training and kind of what I would tell another student. So they're just casual chats every week. If you guys have anything that you'd like to hear about, go ahead and post them in the comments of any of these videos and I will try to make a video on that. I have already started my PGY1 residency training and I'll talk about that experience later, but I still want to finish up this interview information since it's very important. And I had to prep a lot for interviews because I knew nothing, and the interviews I had for my pharmacy jobs previously were not similar at all to residency interviews. So they're very big and they're very important. And I think that one of the most things that people don't prepare for in interviews, at least that I heard from my classmates, is how to ask the interviewers questions and how to ask questions about the program. You won't believe how important this is. I had no idea how many questions I would have to have for each and every program and each and every interview. There's a lot of dead space, and they pretty much turn that dead space onto you, and not in a way that's just like, oh, how's your day going? It's like, what do you want to hear about our program? What do you want to hear about us? In one-on-ones, in question and answer session with groups, in certain cases, you will just not believe that how many times when the space is really dead and they say, do you have any questions? And if you don't have questions, it's very awkward and it almost makes you look bad, I think, at least in a way. I think that's the point of filling up the space, to show your interest and to ask questions so that you're prepared. So there will be numerous times when you'll get asked, what questions do you have? So just be prepared, even with one for every scenario. But I'm going to kind of talk about how I prepared for that. And the reasons that they'll be asking you to have questions for them is because they want to know you're a good candidate, and they do that in a lot of different ways, just like job interviews that are not residency focused. But that includes you being smart enough and prepared enough. They want to know that you know what to ask for and know what to ask a program about. So as you ask questions too, they get to know about you. Well, what are you curious about? What do you have interest in, passions for, values around? Your questions kind of describe you as well. So it's just another facet of the interview process, another facet about you. Programs love to brag about themselves and everything they have to offer. So they could just talk all day about themselves, but they honestly want to know what you specifically want to hear about. And the only way they'll know is when you ask them. So they could go on and on about this great rotation that they have, but you have no interest in that. They're probably not going to want to do that. They're going to want to wait until you approach them about the topic. So that's another reason. They have a wealth of information to talk about and experiences and all those different opportunities, but they want you to tailor it for them, and then they can go ahead and brag about themselves. You can repeat the same questions that you have for several different individuals or sessions in your interview. For example, I asked every different preceptor I encountered what their pathway to their career paths, or what their career path was like into the job they have currently, because it's so interesting to me and it helps me get a really good idea about all the different ways people land in the job that they have, so that I can get ideas as I go into the working world and the job world. So that's just an example of how I got tons of different answers. I think everyone enjoyed that question and I could just use it over and over again. So some you will be able to, some you won't. You'll just kind of know which questions are more overarching and which ones are more specific. And just make sure that your questions are smart. Like that one question I just mentioned is kind of basic and it's not bad, but you need to have a couple different types of questions. So ones that are more basic, ones that are more targeted to what you know about the program, and specifically asking about maybe your career interests. So for me, an ambulatory care interest, I should have asked more questions relating to ambulatory care opportunities, and that's more of a smart question for me versus tell me about your rotation experiences. I could ask, tell me about some of the ambulatory care clinics you guys have here and how pharmacists function within them and how a residency training program would allow me to get exposure to that. That's a more smart question. And you should have more of those than you do basic questions. Like, what do you love about your rotations? Or what do you love about your job? Those are just more basic, and I don't think you're going to get the information you want, and they also maybe know that you weren't as prepared, or that you're not really looking for some of the opportunities that they have because you're not asking about them. So you're just going to have to know, kind of read the room, read the situation, how the conversation is flowing. With programs that you really match well with, the conversation will just be flowing. And I think I talked in a different video about how you match with a residency program and how they really talk about a fit. And where it's basically describing, you know, just even in relationships, how the things that you want and are looking for are found in another organization, another program. And so you kind of match up in what you're both offering and what you're both looking for. So that's kind of what the questions allude to. If you're asking good questions and they can answer them and respond to them and they like your questions, it's kind of like they have what you're looking for. So that's kind of how the fit also comes about in terms of this whole matching with a residency program. And like I said, programs love to brag about themselves. They love to brag about what they have going for them, and that's great. That's not a bad thing. And they just want a resident that just loves their program and they just think that, you know, you're the program for them. So it's very much like into a relationship. It's kind of funny. So how do you come up with questions? How do you come up with good questions? There's a tons of resources online. I'll post a couple links in the video notes that I used. And there's obviously job, you know, just general job questions that you could ask and that won't really pertain to pharmacy, but I would try to specifically do as many pharmacy residency ones as you can. Ask past residents or current residents that you know of what they asked and maybe what they think good questions would be. Definitely, if you know anyone in the residency leadership, you could definitely ask them for advice too. If you have any from even pharmacy school interviews that you could pull from, you know, just kind of get a bunch and then, you know, weed out the ones that you really like. And then target your questions by trying to figure out who's interviewing you. So you should get itineraries for your interviews, and they have individuals who will be talking to you. And as soon as you know that, or really before you interview, you should Google them or look them up on LinkedIn, or most often they'll have a bio on their university or their organizational website. And so you read what their training was, what their specialty is, what their research is like, what they do within schools or within the health system, their leadership, things like that. And then you can come up with specific questions related to them, and that really shows that you're prepared. If you're asking a preceptor that you're interviewing with, you know, about this certain research topic that you heard that they were working on, that really shows that you went the extra mile to learn about them, learn about what pharmacists at their organization are doing, particularly this one interviewing you. I think that would go a long way. I wouldn't friend them on LinkedIn or connect with them on LinkedIn just based on the interview. If you connected with them on mid-year, that's perfectly fine, I think, to add them on LinkedIn, but I would just caution to do that until after you get the residency. But that's just something I thought about when I was researching this video. But I think that's something that you can do to target them. Of course, for the program, you should know enough about them to know what questions you should be asking, and that's just found on their website or found through their informational sessions. So I just want to give an example of what I had because I did online interviews. I had a nice little paper here, and it was broken up into questions about clinical experiences, kind of like the culture of the organization, specific questions for pharmacists or preceptors, and then residents. So I had specific questions that I could pull depending on who was interviewing me or what stage of the interview process I was. And I also had a note card with each program that I interviewed with that had the things that I loved about the program, things that I was excited about. So those were the things I was interested in, and maybe I could expand on those interests and ask more questions relating to them. So one, it helps with that fit process, things that I genuinely like, I'm asking questions about, and I see if I get feedback with that. But then also it just helps, helps breed more questions and helps you try to figure out if the fit is there, and helps you tailor your questions to be more specific. So that's kind of what I would give advice for in terms of interviewing the program. It cannot be understated. If you're in person, you probably can't bring a big paper like this, but even having a couple in your back pocket to go through when you have bathroom breaks or whatever, or on your phone, even though you should try to stay away from your phone when you're on an interview, that would be a good idea as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you liked it, go ahead and like the video and share it with other people that you think it'd be helpful with. Go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat below. And I have one more video on interviews and then I'm done. So see you guys next week.